Let's go back to the Friday night game. It was Hawks v Sydney, 20 points. The Hawks in that game. Will Day, absolutely superb. What are your spin on this game? Both. I thought both teams were very good, but just one sustained it for longer.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Sydney will be devastated by the loss as much as they've got a hard draw coming up. So they've got Brisbane and Fremantle. So that would be no doubt running through Dean's mind. But the coaching side of things, I thought, as the game played out, the maturity and flexibility of Hawthorn shone through. I thought halfway through the second quarter, the Hawks were on top and Sydney did their traditional, all right, push the button. And the players just managed the quarter well. They finished off at halftime in pretty good shape. The third quarter, that's when the coaching kicked in a little bit, Goss. I thought, Sam's more productive, proactive coaching. Sicily goes forward. Mackenzie goes in the middle. There's just some things there that was a bit more positive, whereas Dean, maybe through no choice, let's tag Sicily, let's tag Day. And Day had a great performance. He was really good. But his second half, it actually worked. He had 7 possessions in the second half. So
James Jordan?
Yeah. So, from a coaching point of view, I thought the Swans were on the back foot a little bit and had to plug a few holes where Mitch and his coaches are a little bit more, positive with their moves. These are exciting moves. And Sicily going forward is, one of the great levers he can pull. Not only that,
pull it now though, can't he? Because they've gone and got Barris and Battle. So that really does.
I think he did it last year too. He was a swingman last year. What the good thing about that is he obviously doesn't need a lot of prep. I don't think he'd be going to the forward line meeting, back line meeting, and just flipping. He'd get a bit of an understanding of what his role is when he goes forward. But then you've got to educate other players as well about, okay, so this is going forward. You've got to go back. So you've got to have the flexibility in the side to cater for moving the magnets around, and that's done pre-season. You have your main role, and then you spend, 15% of your time working on a secondary role. So there's a whole program around it. We used to do it, definitely. Before
we saw the Giants do what they did yesterday, Hawthorn have zoomed to favouritism. That is...
Yeah, that's a bit early. But they look good. They look good and they look mature. And, the two words, maturity and flexibility, and they were healthy. Like this time last year when they lost their 5 in a row, they had to work some things out on field, but they were decimated in their preseason. They had a bad preseason with injuries, and they're missing a couple of players now, but they look healthy. A bit like the Giants with the guys they had available, look quite healthy. But Hawthorn, there's no major injuries right now to.
But you wouldn't be getting too concerned for Sydney.
Well, I think we all agree that the second half of Sydney last year wasn't as good as their first half.
Mm-hmm. You did say that.
And their front half and back half have got some holes in it that they're trying to work through. And we've got a brand new coach. And we can maybe talk about this later on with Between the Lines. But he had to go through a new, just this week into round one, he had to go through team meetings, match committee for the first time where he's the final decision maker. And that's different. You do your press conference during the week. You do your captain's run speech to the players, your pre-game speech, all the well-wishing with your family and all that sort of stuff. And then you get halfway through the first quarter and you're thinking about, okay, what do I need to tell the players at quarter time? I'm the final decision maker on any type of moves that get made. It looked a bit heavy for Dean. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But dealing with that as a coach is different than, I've been here 4 years and it's all about, winning, as opposed to messaging and all those things that you're trying to get right in your first game. So his first game's out of the way, Dean, but that would have affected him to a certain degree, the way he coached the game, for sure.
And Tom McCartan, as a full forward, work or not work, we'll find out a little bit later.
Well, that affects Blakey too, because Blakey now is up the other end trying to...
It wasn't as much dash from the...
Well, he had one inside 50.
Yeah.
And I think he's all duck. No, what's that?
All duck, no dinner.
Yeah. So his kicks, if they turn over, it's almost a score the other way. So he needs to work on that a little bit. And I only saw that in the grand final. His very first kick in the grand final and his very first kick on the weekend resulted in a score against. So there's some work to do there with him because he needs to be getting the ball half back, not full back.
We've already dissected the game between Hawthorn and Sydney. Now the coach's call for that game, of course, that was played yesterday and enjoyed it. It was the Giants by 52 points over the Pies. Of course, Finn Callaghan, Taylor, Dacos got cramp. What did you make of it, Simo? Just before you start, I had that stat. Collingwood team, 28 years and 82 days was the player age average. It's the oldest any club has put on the field for a first game of a season?
Yeah, that's a talking point. So the obvious stuff from yesterday, I think everyone's seen the fact that the Giants ran on top of the ground a lot better than Collingwood. We can debate the age profile of the team, and it was a disappointing performance in the end. I just want to dial in on one particular thing, because I think the problem with having two games, everyone is dissecting this to within an inch of its life. But the significance of Briggs going down is and what they did to manage that is something that you got to acknowledge. And when you do your preparation, you have these things called what ifs. So the day before you have a captain's run, and then you'll meet and you'll go, okay, if we lose a key position player, if someone's getting tagged, if we lose a ruck, if we, what are we going to do with our sub? So you go through it takes probably between half an hour and a half, where everyone gives their what ifs to the senior coach, and you all agree on it. So when it happens, and if it happens, you're prepared. And the worst thing I think that can happen is you lose your ruck in the first quarter. So after the game, you look at where the advantage for Collingwood should have been, and it should have been around the stoppages. It should have been a clearance domination, really, when you lose a ruck like that. So the Giants went down 21 contested possessions. All right, but the pre-clearance battle, they lost by 26 and 21 first possession. So the ruck hits it to the midfielder. Collingwood were 21 in front, and that's counted as a contest. But they only win the clearances by 4. So what the Giants did around the ball at the stoppage situation, they nullified a dominant ruckman, got the game played in their own terms from a clearance point of view, and I think it was 6 goals 6 to 2 goals 7 from stoppages. So from a coaching point of view, whatever they did in that space to nullify a dominant ruck in Cameron, I think the hit-outs were plus 24 or something like that, and to only lose the clearances by 4, I think that was a really good coaching performance from the Giants, on top of all the other things we were going to talk about. But how they nullified that was impressive.
There was one passage of play which sort of sums up, for the want of a better cliche, the tsunami, where they handballed their way through and whether Collingwood would lax, I'm not too sure, but they went from back 50 to a goal with about 7 chain of hand passes, and the hand pass from Callaghan, where he barely touched it, was just elite.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that looks great on TV. And if you can score from the back half like that, you're going to do some damage, but it's got to complement other parts of the game. So their contest, their ability to hold up in that third quarter was a 20 inside 50s to 11, and they didn't concede a goal. To stand up in that, there's the depth there in the team that when you do get the game on your terms and you can break from half back and get that overlap, that just complements everything else. It can't be the start point. But if it's part of your makeup, that's when you can do some damage, and that's when you turn a 3-goal win into a 10-goal win. How
important is the sub? So Jacob Ware was the sub yesterday. So he comes in, he's 5'10", 6 foot max, comes in, his role is sort of half forward, mid, small forward, whatever role he played. How important is the sub? Is it just the 23rd player, or do you specifically put in a sub for a role?
It's hard to do that because you could lose a ruck in the first 5 minutes. So if you bring a sub in for a role and he's a specific one position player, that's a challenge. So I think Hawthorn had Frost. Okay. Now he can play tall, he can play small, and he's quick. So he sort of can do a few things if you had to, and he'd free up someone else who might have the flexibility. So he might free up Sicily if he has to come on. But if you lose a key position player and you have to bring on a Weir, you've got to have a plan. Okay, this is what we need to do if this happens, because he's not going to play a ruck, is he? But he can replace someone who replaces someone who replaces someone, and you can cater. So that's all done. That's all done the day before with the sub role. And very rarely is it, he's the most talented player, let's just put him there. It's this guy can actually give us flexibility, or he can free up someone on field who can give us flexibility.
Are you easing a player into game time as a sub? Like to give you an example. Say Nat Five. It's had a pretty interrupted pre-season, but you say to Five, too good a player not to be in your 23, probably not ready to be in the 22, certainly not in the 18, so you get him in and you play him a quarter and a bit.
We had too many times in the last 2 years where we had an A-grade player coming back from injury, and they would say to me at medical meeting, he's got 60 minutes in him. And I go, beautiful, I'll take that. Let's make him a sub. And then the next part of that is, if we lose someone in the first 5 minutes, that compromises everyone else. So as soon as you get to 80 minutes, then I reckon you can put him in as a sub. But if it's a 60-minute you're running a risk, and don't worry, we took the risk a few times, and it never really bit us on the backside. But yeah, Fife's a little bit different. I think he's coming back in the sense that, is he in the best 23? That's the first question. And if he is, how many minutes can he play? That's the second. So, Nat Neal is a classic. If he was long-term injury, 60 minutes, we'll take that. Sometimes you start them with the intent to sub someone out as well, and then you lose someone else. So there's just so many things you need to go by, but there is a tipping point of minutes available.
Couple more. Jake Stringer's got Jesse Hogan was a walk back in. Jake Stringer's an interesting recruit. They reckon he's shed some weight and he's looking better. But did you watch that game yesterday and go, where does he fit in to not be disruptive, if you know what I mean?
I do. I think he'll get an opportunity. I don't think it's a walk-up. He might have to get some sea legs, with a VFL or where are the Giants reserves play? Neefel. So there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Especially with that list and that profile. They don't desperately need him to be just playing to give 3 or 4 shots a goal. They need him to be compliant to what the ethos of the Giants program is. So I would have thought if he plays, fantastic. If he doesn't and needs to prove himself at the lower level, that's fine as well. And he'd be okay with that.
Neefel, VFL, wherever it is. And just a quick one before we let you go. Should you talked about Collingwood? Is there concern for Collingwood? I mean, again, because we looked at how quick and dynamic GWS, everyone looked slow. Pendlebury looked fumbly. Sidebottom looked completely cast. Darcy Moore looked struggling. Should we be concerned about Collingwood?
Not yet. No, not yet. Let's just take a deep breath. And this round is unique because there's only 2 games, and it looked like there were some issues there, but that can be turned around pretty quickly, I would have thought. Let's just see how they go. Who they got next week? Port Adelaide, at the G.
Yep.
So let's just wait. Give it 3 or 4 rounds before we just write them right off like you have.
It's going to be huge, that game. That is going to be a huge game, Port Adelaide and Collingwood.